arms towards the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive and you don't.
Welcome to the Bassline. Today we have a very special episode as I am joined in studio by three guests who are all powerful voices for health, freedom, and COVID justice. Rebecca Charles Jackson is courageously fighting for her deceased daughter, who was murdered by means of the deadly hospital protocols implemented during the COVID event. She has been tireless in her conviction, and she is also a brilliant Substack writer where she has chronicled her efforts. Tricia Lindsay is Rebecca's attorney. She delivered one of the greatest speeches ever during the peak of COVID insanity. And Margaret Anna Alice is an outstanding independent journalist and writer. Her exceptional article about masks was featured in the end notes of my latest article, also about masks, called Let's Talk About Masks. So I would like to welcome to the Bassline. Actually, Rebecca and Margaret are here with us, and Tricia is on the way. She had an emergency that she had to tend to earlier, but she is going to be here momentarily. So, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you so much, Jeremiah, for having me on.
Oh, it's an honor to have you, and we want to hear your story. If you would just take your time to go into just this horrible experience of what you've been through with the loss of your daughter and all that you've done to fight for justice on her behalf, and I would say on the behalf of all of us, because an injustice to one is an injustice to all, and if we do not address the injustices that happened during that period, they're more than likely to repeat themselves and worse.
Thank you so much, Jeremiah, for that introduction. I'll start off by saying that we all believe that America is the greatest nation in this world, and that my illusion, the illusion of the greatest nation, was shattered in 2021. My daughter was injured at birth by the hospital systems that delayed her birth. And 28 years later, I brought her into the hospital just because of a cough. You know, the scare tactics, they're telling us, oh, you have to check, you have to do this. Well, she was sick at home. We treated her at home. She got better. My daughter rarely gets sick because she's very healthy and strong. And I took her in because of cough. I never heard my daughter cough like that. In the ER, she had all normal vitals. Nothing was out of the ordinary. She was never supposed to be admitted into the hospital with normal vitals. They didn't even get a COVID swab. They came back in and said that she has COVID pneumonia. And then they started on remdesivir without my even consent or even knowledge. Before she was even admitted, they started on remdesivir. So my daughter is special needs, and she also a Medicaid recipient. But we have private insurance, but in order to get services, you have Medicaid. After 3 days of being in the hospital, I agreed for them to admit her. I'm with her, and nothing is happening. They keep saying, just let her lay down, don't let her get up. My daughter's very independent, and of course she's better. And the doctor came in and said, oh, we have to bring her into the ICU for observation. Observation, now I know what the observation is for, to see how much poison she could take. They started on all the drugs. After that, I got very sick in the hospital. I asked, could I please go home and take a shower and I'll come back? When I left to go, with permission, they told me I could come back. When I left, I got the phone call from hell that says I can't come back in unless I have a negative COVID test. It was 13 days later, but in those 13 days, they decided to push the vent. I never got to see my daughter. They would not let me use the iPad. They would not let me call my daughter. My daughter never been alone in her life, and her biggest fear is that she doesn't want to be alone. And even when I was with her, she only wanted me to stay by her side. Mommy, please stay. Mommy, don't go. And I sent flowers. I sent her iPad, and they refused everything before my husband was bringing everything into the hospital, and they would bring it up to the room. Now they said nothing could go up to the room. So if you look at the pattern, it's a deliberate, it's fraudulent, it's beyond evil, what we call medicine in America today. A healthy child walking into the hospital, and they started on all these heavy drugs. So once they got me out, that was permission for them to go all in. At day 2, they tied her to the bed when she woke up and she's crying for me. They restrained her and they called me and told me, oh, we have to restrain Danielle because she's pulling off the mask. Well, she's special needs. She's supposed to have someone with her. That's an American Disability Act violation that just did to Danielle. So they left her alone in the room, tied up to a bed, crying and screaming for her mommy and expecting her to have, breathing, be breathing and be acting normal. By Friday, 2 days later, they started her on Presidex. Presidex is a drug to paralyze you. So my daughter is awake and they're paralyzing her to the bed. Saturday morning, they told me, oh, she needs a vent. She needs to go on the vent. And I'm not seeing her. I'm nowhere knowing what's happening. And I trusted the doctors because my mom used to go to that hospital. It was quite normal before, Northwell Health, Glen Cove Hospital. And I asked the doctor, I said, if this is your daughter, would you put her on the vent? And he said yes. It's just for a few days. So I agreed for her to go on the vent because it's just going to be for a few days. And then I started researching on the drugs, and I found out about the remdesivir and how poisonous and toxic it is. And I hired Ralph Laringo to get her ivermectin because I asked the hospital, could you give her ivermectin? And they said no. It's against the policies. So by 10 days later, I was able to get Danielle ivermectin into the hospital, which the hospital delayed giving. They said it has to go to the legal department. So I had a court order to immediately dispense ivermectin to Danielle. When I get back in on the day 13, the doctor is showing me Danielle labs and saying, oh, look at the computer, we need to stop the ivermectin because the liver enzyme is going up, we need to stop it. So I'm being pressured now to stop the ivermectin because if I don't do what they say, they're going to kick me out again. And I just came back in. And so I agreed to stop it because I know my daughter is healthy. And I said to him, I said, it's a remdesivir that caused that, and they all were silent. When I saw my daughter, I came in swollen, didn't look anything like her. 2 days after they had her on the vent, Danielle got a heart attack because of the heavy drugs and the high vent settings. They never discussed that with me. They never called me and said, Mommy, we just had a heart attack. They never called in a cardiologist by her bedside. The pulmonologist spoke to a cardiologist, and the pulmonologist, the COVID ventilator doctor, he's the one who was giving all the medication. So they continued this without telling me, and every time I asked them, why is this happening? It's COVID. Why is she swelling up? It's COVID. Why she has a fever? My daughter now getting a central line infection. She's getting, I forgot to say that they admitted her. They told me she has COVID pneumonia, but on the medical records, they admitted her for sepsis and hypoxia and respiratory failure, which is fraud, which is a lie. So if I didn't have the medical records, I would never know. So this went on and on, the drugging, the poisoning of my daughter, fentanyl patches, fentanyl IV, fentanyl stat now, injector now. She was overdosed on IV Tylenol. They were putting my daughter on more drugs than a criminal on death row would have. In fact, they had an easier death than my daughter had. They kept poisoning. They just kept pushing the drugs. I mean, I had a nurse review the records, a nurse of 42 years, and she had nightmares after reading the record. She said, I don't know how anybody could ever do this to a child. So the kid writing in the chart, oh, cardiac arrest, or cardiac this, and they were not doing nothing. Oh, the kidneys are working for now. They saw the kidneys were failing and remdesivir is a known cause of kidney failure and organ failure. And yet, instead of giving her 5 wrongs, they decided to give my daughter 10 wrongs of remdesivir. So intention was there to make sure that she will not survive. And this was 40 days of torture, 40 days of being poisoned, a virgin, a young girl who is so happy and loving and tells everybody she loves them. And I know she was telling the killers that she loved them too. And that, crying for her mommy. And everybody knows Danielle in Glen Cove and Locust Valley. She's like the little mayor in Locust Valley. And she's such a loving, sweet child. For people who in white coats to call themselves doctors and medicine and lawyers, and PAs, to treat a human being like this is worse than you treat any animal. It's worse than you treat a criminal. And this is the hospital system that we're living with today in the United States, that I could say my illusion has been shattered.
Wow. Yeah, this is a tough episode, everyone, and I thank you guys for tuning in, because this is not entertainment or something that's pleasant to listen to. It's just, it's something that really shakes me up, because I love my own children so much. So when I hear about people losing their children, it just sends the sorrow just straight through my soul. And I want to shift the conversation over to Margaret Anna Alice, and she's sitting right here in studio with us. And we'll circle back around and discuss all of these matters. But if you could introduce yourself, Margaret Anna Alice. You've done a lot of writing about COVID justice, what I call the COVID event. I mentioned I linked your article about masks to my recent article called Let's Talk About Masks. You've done a lot of writing. What compelled you to get into this whole struggle? What drives you in this ongoing battle that we're in for, the conscience of humanity?
Well, let's see, March 2020, I started trying to reach out to people in just my local community through nextdoor.com. I don't know if you know that social media app. It's for, neighborhoods. Turned out to be probably the most censorious platform out there. And I just began experiencing, I was really just trying to talk sense to people and say, remember, just a couple months ago that we were saying, and basically all the protocols that were being introduced were upside down from conventional health medicine. And so I just started seeing people transforming into these, petty bullies and embracing the policies of isolation and turning against friends and neighbors. And it was just such a sad experience to witness, and something I recognized from history. And I was like, I have to speak out. I have to say something. And so eventually, when it became impossible to communicate on Nextdoor because of all the censorship, I just spontaneously decided to start a Substack one day. And my first article was called A Primer for the Propagandized, just trying to help people see, this is not a partisan issue, because they were using tribalism to pit us against each other. And I'm just trying to say, this is what has repeated throughout history. This is what leads to genocide. This is the road to totalitarianism, and just trying to point out the markers. And really just showing how people's cognitive biases were being wielded against them, and people were being emotionally and psychologically manipulated into doing ridiculous things and cruel things. And most people know me by my poem, Mistakes Were Not Made, an Anthem for Justice, which I published on New Year's Day, 2023. And then Dr. Tess Lowry, the founder of the World Council for Health, read it for a video in March that went internationally viral. And so many people resonated with it because, like Rebecca said, if this is happening, these nurses are administering fentanyl and remdesivir, and they know, nurses call that run death is near. Mm-hmm. They know exactly what they're doing. And if it weren't for the collusion of cowardly people who just want to keep their jobs and obey orders and are willing to inject lethal drugs into an innocent person for their own convenience, what I call the cruel elites and the philanthropaths would not be able to achieve, essentially this depopulation agenda and, injuring millions of people that is profiting the medical industrial complex. And that's why I'm always about trying to help people become unhurtable. It's like, if you can see through the propaganda and the manipulation, they can't pull crap like this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well stated. So many things come to mind. For one thing, you talk about, these people just sort of carrying out these orders like automatons, basically, in the hospital setting. But, I apply the same thing to principals in schools, and all these people in all these various institutions. Like, I wrote about it in one of my articles. I'm trying to remember which one offhand, where I said, why do you want the awesome responsibility of saying that I need an invasive medical procedure to attend school, or for a child to participate in after-school activities and all of this kind of stuff? And if something goes wrong, well, you're not going to take responsibility for it.
Right.
So, I don't understand, among a million other things I don't understand, is why would people want to be involved with medical decision making for other people? But also, back to Rebecca and your situation with Danielle and the loss of your daughter, there's a term that, I don't know if I coined the term, but for many years I was an activist against the military-industrial complex. And my big revelation, I guess, through all of what I've learned over the past several years is that it's the military-medical industrial complex, and it was the entire time.
Yes.
And if you die in the hospital, it's just like a soldier dying on a battlefield, collateral damage. And you also notice on these various commercials for pharmaceutical products, I think they've been conditioning us for years about this notion of side effects, quote unquote, which are really just the effects of these various products. And it's this notion that, we're all willing to gamble with our lives, basically. We're all prepared for this give and take of, okay, well, I reduced these symptoms, but then I harmed my internal organs. And then sometimes, you need additional medication to now protect the organs that were injured by the last medication we issued to you. And, what are your thoughts about the hospital system in general, and what it would look like in a sane world, I guess? If we were to say, okay, we're not doing this anymore, what would it look like then?
For me, it would look like smaller hospitals. It would look like a place where people go in and they get well and they remain healthy.
Yeah.
But we have become, one of the largest medicine industrial complex. And we are cash cows. When I learned from Gary Knowles, when I learned about Ritalin and what they were doing to my child and how they keep changing medications, and I learned that it was a class 2 drug, and if she got injected, it would be like cocaine, and I was too scared. And I stopped it, and I searched, and I found solutions. I started to go to the Institute of Achievement for Human Potential, where they work with children like this. They work with adults with special needs, and right away they said, no gluten, no sugar, no dairy, no milk. She needs probiotics, she needs vitamins, she needs this. And I saw my child change. And I wanted that for other children, so I brought them into New York to teach other families. And I believe that medicine should really be about healing, because if I had let them continue, my daughter would have had maybe 20 to 30 different medicines by the time she reached 21. And when they start you off young with all the vaccines and they injure you, your child going to need more vaccines and more medicine. And it's a system that they are using our bodies for money. We're cattle to them. And the only way we could stop it is by stop going to these places. Find alternative care. Find your health in your food and your water. Years ago, people didn't have all these medication. Now children, by the time they reach 3, they're on pills already, and that is not normal. I grew up in Trinidad. I never see kids on medication. I never heard of it. So when my daughter went on it, my parents were like, what are you doing? Throw those pills away. What are you doing? And, but I was in America.
Yeah.
I was hearing from the American doctors. What does my parents know? They're in Trinidad. They don't know anything. I trusted. And like I said, the illusion, the lies, the truth that's wrapped in lies and lies wrapped in truth need to be exposed. This is not a country of the free, a country of the brave, and a country where justice is prevail for all. It's a lie.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And my whole political framework, I've stated it over and over again, is, I wrote an article, it was I think my 4th Substack article called "We Missed Our Muhammad Ali Moment." And to me, when they said, okay, now everyone needs to take experimental vaccines, that was a time when everybody needed to stand up and say, no.
Exactly.
You don't know how to clean a subway station. You don't know how to improve what's going on in our schools. So you definitely don't need this whole additional responsibility of now medicating the public, which, is this huge leap in the wrong direction in terms of one-size-fits-all medicine. We don't want one-size-fits-all medicine. We want individualized care.
Yes.
And I remain amazed and stunned to this day how there's so many people who, I think a lot of, I guess, the political class or the professional managerial class, there's this whole just legion of people. They consider themselves well-informed. They read the New York Times, and they are so clueless, and they're so incapable of just having a serious discussion about serious matters, and they fancy themselves as just, so brilliant to just use the term conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist and all this kind of these monikers to just push the conversation aside. And I thought there were certain things that were just sort of well known, like the fact that we're just over-medicated as a society in general before the COVID injection. So if we're already over-medicated and taking more antidepressants and antipsychotics and painkillers than any civilization in history, do we need more interventions into our bodies? Maybe we need to just actually start taking care of our health in a real way. And you were mentioning water and food. What politicians are addressing that from either party? You don't see a politician get up saying, hey, look, we need to make sure that our water system is secure. We need to support the farmers who actually produce the food. And, it's crazy because we're sort of an urban-centric society in a sense, I think. We sort of, we have to accommodate the needs of the urban citizens who aren't producing food. They're into tech and cryptocurrency and pornography and doing these unproductive industries, and we just, okay, well, the food's going to be there on the shelf at our local supermarket, but maybe we need to establish direct relationships with the family farmers. And there's actually a lot of farmers, from what I understand, who are doing organic farming, and they don't have the certified organic label because that's a whole whole other commercial thing that they've made. So a return to real principles of health in terms of what we eat, clean water, clean air. I see these streaks in the sky. Some people call them chemtrails. Some people say, oh, that's nonsense. If you look it up on AI, they'll say, oh, no, that's just based on the air temperature and the angle that the plane is flying at, and sometimes it leaves a streak in the sky. Really, I did not see streaks of this kind across the sky every day, every time of day. I don't know how many years ago. Yeah. As a kid, I just didn't see that. So, it's pretty scary, the whole range of things that are being thrown at us as a American citizenry, but also as a global population. And you used the term before, depopulation. It seems to me that there is a depopulation thing happening, and it made me think about something that I still don't have an answer to, which is, what is the margin of error on the world population? Like they say that we have 8 billion people on the planet. What's the margin of error on that? Because I think before the mass injection campaign, I think it was like 7.9 billion. And I think we've still, despite the excess deaths in various countries, we've crossed the threshold of 8 billion. But, I just kind of wonder what is the trajectory of this depopulation kind of thing, because they're not just wiping us off the face of the earth all at once.
Right.
But we're being sort of killed slowly,
Yes,
and people's
and
lives are
profitably.
being shortened, right? And as far as like the COVID injections go, there's a lot of there's a lot of died suddenly cases.
Yeah.
You read about it every day. But I also think that the biggest concern, one of the biggest concerns, is just people having years shaved off of what was supposed to be their life expectancy.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of people who are maybe 20 years old or 30 years old or 40 years old right now who took their COVID injections and say, oh, well, I feel fine, or I feel okay.
Right.
But the problem is you were going to live until you were 90 and you're going to die now instead when you're 60
Yes.
or when you're 70
I'll probably
or,
before.
or
Yeah,
earlier,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Cancer, yeah.
Cancers, heart issues, the clots,
right.
the
Yeah.
rubbery clots.
Yes, my friend Laura Kasner has been researching that, doing the embalmer clot surveys.
Wow.
For
So
several years.
give us, Margaret Ann Alice, if you could tell us just offhand, what have been some of your observations and what are your thoughts about COVID vaccine injury and death? What have you seen? What have you researched?
Well, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Heather Hudson and her son Cody Hudson. I wrote a poem called Lament of the Vax Injured a couple years ago, and Cody read it for a really powerful video that I can send to you later. Cody he's just one of millions of examples, but he's a particularly tragic example. He was a 21-year-old healthy college student, 4.0, really passionate about his education, and then he was running like 20 miles a week in the gym, very healthy. And then he's on the spectrum, and he was emotionally manipulated by a relative into getting the shot against his parents' wishes, because they knew the potential dangers, and he'd had bad reactions to previous shots, but he did it without their knowledge, and then he got a second shot, and he had like a stroke very quickly. He had just this cascade of issues that wound up he wound up terminally ill. And he just suffered his 5th stroke a couple months ago. He's having cardiac issues, and so basically it's just a really tragic situation, because this is happening all over, but it's like all these people with so much promise, and their empathy was weaponized into making them think this was the right thing to do, and they essentially wound up committing gradual suicide. And the military medical industrial complex is making a fortune in the process.
Right.
Together with Wall Street.
Right.
It's all Wall Street.
And I want to go back a little bit to what you said earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, do you need to?
No, go
Okay.
ahead.
About what a hospital or healthcare system that actually functions might look like. Well, let's start by, instead of incentivizing lethal protocols like remdesivir and ventilation and financially rewarding hospitals for bad outcomes, let's actually incentivize good, healthy outcomes, getting people out and about, and basically sunshine, diet, nutrition, just empowering individuals to take care of their own health.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one of my best friends, as we were sort of deciphering everything that was going on, before the shots were even available, he said, I've come to the conclusion that to protect our health, we basically need to do everything the opposite as instructed.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So they say, stay inside.
Yes.
No, go outside.
Exactly.
And get some sunshine, get
Yes.
some exercise.
Yes.
They say, isolate yourself. No, make sure to not be isolated.
Yes.
And to maintain your relationships with family and friends. Be fearful. No, don't be fearful. Just right down the line, everything that they said and everything that they were promoting was basically the opposite of how we should have approached the situation.
That's exactly right.
And these absurd situations of people being arrested on the beach. There's no one within 100 yards of you, but you're not supposed to be on the beach.
Yes.
So we're going to come and arrest you.
Yes.
Going and harassing people who are outside getting exercise. Oh, you're not allowed to be here at the exercise facility. Even, the playgrounds for kids. I had to explain to my 3-year-old son, well, why can't we go to the playground, Papa? He kept asking. I said, well, there's some ridiculous stuff going on, and the playground will be open soon. And then, then when he returns to the playground, half the kids are masked.
Wow.
And to me, that was part of the absurdity of the mask thing, which I just wrote an article about that I mentioned, and I referenced your excellent article about masks. It's like, if I'm scared that my child is going to catch a fatal disease, we're just not going to go to the playground.
Right,
I'm not going to say there's a fatal disease floating around, wafting in the air, man. We'll put on a mask and hope we don't catch it. If you're that scared, don't go to the playground. Same thing. I went to a recording session, and I was the only musician in the session not wearing a mask. I said, I have to be able to breathe to play my instrument. I need oxygen to the brain. And it was in a sort of a confined space as well, just making it worse. But I said, if I'm mortally afraid, I'm just not going to be here. I'm not afraid.
Right.
I need to stop for just a moment to make some announcements here, how we can support the Bassline Medical Freedom radio program. I'll try to be quick. First of all, Friday, June 26th, we have the incredible Dr. Leonard Horowitz is actually going to be in New York joining us at Rock Mill Fitness. He's the one who introduced me to the 528 frequency concept. And Dr. Horowitz is going to be here on Friday, June 26th. Doors are 6 p.m. The address is 274 Lenox Avenue. We really want to make an event out of this, so please make it worth Dr. Horowitz's trip all the way up from Florida and enjoy our jam session, which is going to be a little bit shorter than usual. And we also, of course, are affiliates here with Frontier Farm. Please go to frontierfarm.com. That's FRONTIERPHARM.com. Go get some mouthwash, some toothpaste, some wound care, some skin care. Chlorine dioxide really is a marvel, and it's one of the incredible breakthroughs that people have discovered in this period of self-empowerment. IPTV, if you're not hip to private IPTV, you got to get with it. It's just the best deal in television viewing by far. That's privateiptvaccess.com, and the code for that is Hosea. That's capital J, capital HOSEA. Oh, I forgot to mention, for Frontier Farm, that's the Bassline. So capital THE space capital BASSLINE. That's your discount code at frontierfarm.com. Also check me out on Substack, of course, jeremiahhosea.substack. Check out my new article, which features Margaret Anna Alice's article in the endnotes called Let's Talk About Masks. And I am also the founder of RemoteLearningChess.com. So please contact me for a chess lesson right away. If you're doing homeschooling, please consider homeschooling with chess included in the curriculum. It will activate every other aspect of learning, I promise. And if you'd like to call in, we do have a packed house here, so I hope we have a chance to take a phone call if possible. But our number is 888-874-4888. And those are the different ways you can support the Bassline Medical Freedom radio program that you're listening to. And we are honored to be joined now by Tricia Lindsay, who is Rebecca's attorney. And I mentioned earlier, you gave one of the greatest speeches I've ever heard. I mean, I've listened to a lot of speeches.
Yeah,
I
love that speech.
Spoken word, and I like lectures, and I listen to a lot of different things, and I've certainly listened to a lot of things pertaining to the COVID events and all the injustices that went along with that. But on my nightly space that I host on X called End All Tyranny, we played, I don't know where the speech was delivered.
I think it was the convoy after the Canadian Tucker's speech. I used it in one of my articles.
Did
You're
you?
such a badass.
Yeah.
I shared it with Jose too.
Yeah, I mean, we listened to the whole speech end to end, and everyone was like, wow, everyone wanted a link to that speech to have on hand. And where do we begin? I mean, first of all, let me ask you, is it true that you were not an attorney at the beginning of all of this?
So my life has transitioned. a few times. Life has can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So it has transitioned a few times, and I really think that when it pivoted at the time that it did, it was actually for this moment, for this time, for COVID coming in.
Yeah.
First, thank you, first of all, for having me. Thank you for being patient.
Oh, glad to have you.
And that speech was given in Albany on
Yes.
the legislative steps, but
Yeah.
I think it was retweeted a number of times for different events, including the Canadian convoy. But no, I wasn't an attorney. I became an attorney in 2016.
Wow.
I graduated from law school in 2014. Took the bar in 2015 and was admitted the following year after doing the process. And then subsequently became admitted into a number of different states, which I'm trying to scale back now because it becomes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was really designed and orchestrated for COVID.
Wow.
I had originally said that I was leaving. I was an educator. I wore multiple hats during my career as an educator. My initial education was foundation is in nursing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went into, decided to go to law school, I said I was going to pretty much advocate for education legislation nationally, watching the disparities and things that were going on in education and the changes that were going on, the children getting sicker and sicker, more and more emotional disturbed, just watching everything change. I literally kept saying to a colleague of mine that there's an experiment going on. Yes. Someone somewhere is taking notes. Yes. I don't know who and what, but there's an experiment going on because a lot that's happening around me doesn't make sense. And if you pay attention, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But if you're not paying attention, then you won't. And so I decided to go to law school for that reason, not understanding that God had different cards. And I did know it had to do with children, a lot had to do with children, but just advocating or fighting for them from a different standpoint. But I anticipated other avenues coming into play, but never what took place. But I'm thankful. I'm honored that God has chosen me to be a warrior in this war, in the midst of it, because that's what I see it as. And it's interesting when you get to a certain point in your life when you see all the pieces of the puzzle coming together. You know, my nursing background, my teaching background, even my background, the way I grew up in the church that I grew up in, it prepared me for extemporaneous speaking. It prepared me for public speaking. And so it's just everything came together. And so when COVID hit, I recognized very early that there was something wrong. And it just did not make sense what I was seeing, the instructions that were being given. And in 1990, I wrote a paper on AIDS that kind of took me down that pathway anyway when I was 19 years old. And I did some serious research that pretty much got my paper confiscated by, by the university, and they tried to threaten me, but I turned it on them and said, no, wrong person. Let's try this differently. So, you know, I've been down the rabbit hole for a long time. And I'm glad to see that the rabbit hole I'm glad to see that it's real, just because I'm not crazy, but not really happy because it's unfortunate that our society has descended to this point. You know?
Yeah, totally agree. Of course, not having memorized that speech, that famous speech verbatim, I remember you making reference. I don't, of course, know exactly how you phrased it, but it's a molestation. It's a rape event.
It's
and I just
medical rape.
Yeah, medical rape. But and I just I thought that was one of the most important things. I mean, I teach my children, and I teach all the children that I work with that no is the most important word in the dictionary, basically.
Absolutely.
So I don't understand how so many people didn't understand that or lost sight of that or whatever. Like if I don't feel comfortable with something, that's it. You can't force me, you know? And if you want to do that, which I don't think, and I just want to say, to be clear, I don't really subscribe to the idea of saying, oh, well, it's your right. Because I don't think you should have, per se, the right to be poisoned in a medical facility. And if you think you're doing something beneficial and it's not beneficial and it's harmful.
Absolutely.
That's not what we mean by rights.
Absolutely.
But let's say we're genuinely confused and we think we're doing a good thing. Still, my right to say no should not be undermined at any point. And what do you think it is that's going on that so many people don't have a grasp of that important concept of, well, I say no. I don't feel comfortable with this. I've done research that makes me concerned about the outcome of this. How have so many people become so casual about disrespecting the right to say no?
I don't think many people understand their rights and the extent to which they have it. In this country, for one, and it begins at the school system.
Yes.
It stretches into the media, and in our lives, things play out. And I think fear is one of the things that is used. Fear suspends thought, stops all analysis, and becomes knee-jerk reactions. And people will say yes, even if they're fearful as to what happened. I've had so many conversations with people who said, I don't want to take it, and I know it might hurt me, but I need to go to work. I want to travel. And I said, but if you're dead.
Yeah, you can't go to work if you're dead.
And
can't
if
spend
you're
your money
sick,
if you're dead.
you can't do any of those things. So I'm not understanding this. So I think, if I may be frank, you heard my speech, so I think it's a psyop that has been going on for a very long time.
Yeah.
I think the materials in our lives became our gods.
Mm-hmm.
I think social media helped to push that at a certain point.
Yeah.
Likes and belonging to groups. It started with different groups that we wanted our children to belong to, and different organizations and clubs and things of that nature. And so to stand up and stand out by yourself is not a very popular thing. And it's scary when you need that validation. And social media took us right down that rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
Because now if no one's liking my videos, if no one's liking what I'm saying, there's a problem, right? And so we gave a microphone to illegitimate voices that weren't trained or and how to handle that, the responsibility that comes with that, as well as the accountability, right? And so I think it was set up, to be honest with you. I really do. I think it was trained. School, they suspended analytical teaching. Yeah. It's teach to the test, right? Read this, answer these questions that's scripted. If you answer it this way, then you get you're top notch, right? You're the top student. Yeah. But if you dare to think outside the box and don't think along that lines, even if it blows their answer away, you're still considered as not meeting the standard, right? Because what was that standard? Yeah. The standard was what they ascribed to, what they set up. So it doesn't matter if you were a genius. We don't want the genius. We want the person that is trained to operate within these 4 lines. Yeah. And if you dare step out of that line, then something's wrong with you. Now we need to put you on Ritalin. Now we need to put you in this particular class. Now we need to or send you to prison or there are different categories set up. And so that's what was going on. And so they knew how we were going to react, how the majority was going to react. They knew what was going to happen because they tested it. There was one, I forget, was it during, I think it was the World Trade. I think it was during that time when the lights went out on Broadway. And people's lives were lost. We didn't know what was going on in the world. We didn't know what was happening. And the news said this is the first time that the lights on Broadway had ever been out. And I said, we have lost our minds. And I don't remember how old I was young. I was in college. But that struck me. And I said, people are dying, and we're talking about the lights on Broadway? I said, we will not win. There's no way. Because if we're that shallow that we're worried about the lights on Broadway, when people's lives are being lost, then we've lost ourselves in that. And so that's a test, right? We're so concerned about everything else. Except for really what's important. And so it was tested. So they knew what was going to happen.
I was just saying before you joined us that I wrote an article called "We Missed Our Muhammad Ali Moment." And Muhammad Ali, the reason why I use that example is he refused to fight in the Vietnam War. He said, I do not condone that.
Absolutely.
And I will pay a price even to stand by my convictions. And when people failed to say no during this time, I feel that they ushered in the apocalypse. I view what we are dealing with now as basically a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Because we relinquished our rights. And of all the terms, there's a lot of terms that people use to refer to the COVID shots. And I think the best one is, as unfortunate as it is, the most accurate term is the suicide shot. Because you didn't know what was in that. They're called the depop jab, the killer vaccines, the kill shot, the clot shot, the death dart. But I think if we had to only pick one, the suicide shot. Because you shouldn't be injecting unknown substances into your body.
Absolutely.
And that's actually one thing I find strange about COVID, and we could talk about all kinds of additional things like PCR fraud and media manipulation, and how so many of the deaths were actually protocol deaths.
Absolutely.
And, if you look at The Real CDC by John Bodwin, which I think is like one of the most important documents in all of this, and that's the thing that people don't understand as far as the death pertaining to the COVID shots. We have absolute proof. You could choose to not look at the proof, but we have, thanks to John Bodwin, we have record level source data showing an increase in excess death in every state, in every country where these were vastly administered. Actually, you know what the leading killer is from the COVID shots that most people don't know? Renal failure. Yeah.
Myocarditis shut down.
Yeah, exactly. Myocarditis is actually way down on the list compared to renal failure. There's an epidemic in the United States right now in renal failure, and yes, we could point to the killer vaccines. But it just strikes me, it's so amazing how, I don't know what it is, and I there's so many questions that I have that I remain basically on square one with all of my questions. Like, for example, how come we would normally be concerned if someone fell off of their bicycle? You would say, oh, I'm sorry that what happened, I hope you're okay. But if someone dies from a vaccine, people just turn away. They just say, oh, well, no, vaccines are great. They start protecting this commercial product.
Immediately, that they know nothing about and cannot explain. Cannot break it down and cannot explain. You know, and it just absolutely makes no sense. And that's why I think it was a psychological operation. I really do. Certain buzzwords. I started really noticing it when I would talk to people about it. And you would hit certain topics like children, right? Adults are one thing, but when you start talking about children dying and things of that nature, that usually gets people riled up and will draw them in. And I would literally see people they would just enter a blank stare, and they would go on to another topic as if you didn't just say what you said. And did you just hear me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but such and such, and they would just go off onto something else. And I started doing it on purpose because I wanted to see if I was going to keep getting the same reactions. And it was consistent. And I said something happened. But then what I started asking was, why isn't it doing that with me? Why am I not reacting like that? Those of us that are getting it, that understand what's happening, who sees what's happening, why aren't we triggered by these words? Where were we when the operation was happening that it missed us? You know, and I can only just come down to that we are the remnant. And that's what I say. We are the remnant. We are the voices of this end time, because I think we are in end times, and I think we are the voices no matter what you believe in or whatever. At the end of the day, COVID brought us all together. It brought us all together. Race, religion, creed, color, it brought us together, right? You were either on this side of COVID or the other side. And at that point, everything was suspended because it didn't matter what you looked like, what you believed in or whatever. Everyone was dealing with the same situation. And I just think that we are the remnant, and it's unfortunate because we're going to have people that are going to have casualties to draw attention to what is happening. And I do believe that that is what is going on. I believe that there are warriors that were set up that would give a voice. Media, we need the media mountain, we need the attorneys, we need the government, we need people in medical industry and all fields to I guess, shed a light on what's happening and to fight in this war, because it is a war. And there are going to be certain martyrs, per se, that we're going to have, right? And I believe that, Danielle was one to shed a light on what is going on in the hospitals, what took place in the hospitals, what has been taking place. All right, my first degree is in nursing. And I chose not to go into nursing because I saw what was happening in the medical industry way back then. And I said, you know what? I'm going to end up losing my job or my license. This is just not going to work. Because I was a nursing student and challenging the doctors before I was even done. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I said, okay, Trish, this is not it for you. This is not going to work. So my whole life has just been led, and I just believe that when things happen, when I met Rebecca, when Graham brought the case to me, And initially, I wanted to say no because I'm a solo practitioner and I'm just overwhelmed. But when I heard about what took place, I couldn't say no. And then I prayed about it, and I said, okay, how do I say no? I have to, let me help. Let me see what can be done, even up against this Goliath called Northwell. But Northwell's not bigger than God. And if this is his war, which I believe it is, then we're good. We just have to hold the line. We just have to fight, and we just have to do what we're meant to do.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we all are.
Yeah.
We are just, playing our role in this greater war that we didn't ask for.
Yeah, please.
I would say one thing. I think the difference between all of us and the others is that we are using common sense. I think common sense, as growing up in Trinidad, my parents would say you need book sense, but you also need common sense. I don't think they teach common sense. And you're from Jamaica, so I'm sure your mom.
Common sense is not common.
Yeah, I just say sense.
Yeah, it's not
I
common.
hope you have some sense.
Right. But they literally don't teach analysis, and they've stopped that. So they're not teaching children to think. They are not. When I taught in school very quickly, I didn't even put, they were like, oh, you use the Socratic method. We have dialogue. That's what we do. Right. And I didn't mind if kids gave me a wrong answer. I more wanted to understand how they got to that wrong answer. Explain to me how you got to that answer, and then we can go from there. And I didn't give them all the answers. I'd let the kids correct each other. And let's build and figure it out, because once you learn how to break down thought and understand it, you're good.
Some of the comments you made earlier reminded me of just what I deal with in terms of looking at my son's homework. Like, my son is very good at math. If you just line up a bunch of math problems for him, he'll get up 100%. But they present it in this convoluted way that even the teachers kind of laughed out of embarrassment when I said, look, if I owned a company and one of my workers was presenting this to the company in this manner, I would fire them on the spot.
Absolutely. That's a whole, if you want to bring me back, that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, we're almost out of time. I guess we have about a minute left. Just in like 30 seconds or 45 seconds, what phase of the game are we in now? What does everyone need to do next? Margaret, go ahead.
We need to develop the courage to say no, because we are facing a crisis of cowardice. And earlier you mentioned experiment. I have an article called, Are You a Good German or Are You a Badass German? And basically it means that we need to stand up, we need to see what's wrong, we need to have the courage to say it. We're at this convergence of experiments, and Ash conformity, Milgram obedience, and Stanford prison experiment, and we need to step out of that trap and embolden others to say no.
Great summary.
My case is I have depositions on Monday with Tricia. It's the first case in New York, pretty much, that's going to go to trial, right, Tricia, for COVID. And everybody knows about George Floyd, and I like to say George Floyd had 11 NGs of fentanyl in his toxicology report. They pumped my innocent child, and she had 53 NGs of fentanyl to destroy every organ. So we need your support. Like Tricia said, she's a single attorney. We need the story to go out. We need funding. We need help. And we need like-minded people to join us in this fight.
There are multiple people that have experienced what Rebecca's experienced, but they didn't know what to do, don't know what to do. As a matter of fact, some listening to this will probably say, is that what happened? It may, shine a light on what took place in their situation. And this is one fight, but it's a fight for all. It's a fight for many,
right.
And that's what's taking place. And so supporting cases like this are so, it's so pivotal, because it's affecting all of our lives. Northwell has to be held accountable for the thousands, I would dare to say, of lives that have been lost under their watch.
Right.
And we will call this nothing less than murder. And when you look at the medical records, that's what it was.
Right on. Well, Tricia Lindsay, Rebecca Charles Jackson, Margaret Anna Alice, thank you guys for joining me here today. It's been an honor. We have to wrap it up, but we're going to continue this conversation tonight on X, on the Bassline Extra. So tune in. I'm at Earth Driver on X, formerly known as Twitter, and we will continue the conversation there. So everyone have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Stay strong. Keep fighting the good fight. Thank you.